Good morning, welcome to a new video. My name is Katie, if you're new here, and I am a certified naturalist and also a nature journalist. So today I have 3 of my previous nature journals here to share with you, and I'm going to talk about why I prefer using dry media sketchbooks over watercolor sketchbooks for my watercolor nature journaling. So I started my first nature journal in 2022, January of 2022, and before that I was sketchbooking. So at the time I had been following a lot of artists who worked mostly or exclusively in sketchbooks. That idea really appealed to me. I love the idea of having a finished book that you can flip through and there's beautiful illustrations to look at. So I had never sketchbooked before, but I knew that I wanted to try. So I got a sketchbook and I started working in it. And at the time I was trying different media. So I had watercolors, inks, I think I had alcohol markers, Prismacolor colored pencils, lots of different media to try. And it didn't go well. I still today don't really see myself as someone who can draw very well, especially because most of the time I'm drawing to paint over it. And I've definitely improved my drawing skills and I've started to include graphite in my nature journal. But at the time, I had pretty much no experience drawing just to draw. And so when I tried to do this in a sketchbook format, I found that it didn't work for me. So I ended up being quite disappointed with the way that my sketchbook was turning out, and it made me feel like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. I thought, what if I'm looking at sketchbooking through the wrong lens? And what if I looked at it through the lens of nature journaling instead? So in 2022, as I said, that was my first time setting the intention that I would nature journal through the whole year. So I had started nature journaling a little bit before that, so I would say near the end of 2021. So I went from sketchbooking to nature journaling, and my first nature journal spread was cute. I liked it. It was very different from what I do now and kind of what at that time I wanted my nature journal to look like, but it worked. It felt like, okay, this will work for me. This is already much more successful than sketchbooking. So yes, in 2022, January of 2022, I started my first year in the nature journal, and I was really prioritizing having a nature journal that was thick enough, it had enough pages in it that it would encompass the whole year. And finding a sketchbook or a mixed media book, any kind of book, finding a sketchbook that had enough pages to get me through an entire year was really, really difficult. And so what I found was the Royal and Langnickel sketchbook. So that's what I've used most years, nature journaling. And obviously it's a sketchbook, so it's made for dry media. It's not made for wet media. And if you know my work, you know that I mostly use wet media. I mostly use watercolor. But I took a chance and I love it. I love working in that sketchbook. At this point in time, I've used the Royal and Langnickel dry media sketchbook, and I've also used a hand-bound watercolor sketchbook as my nature journal. And I prefer the dry media sketchbook far more than the watercolor sketchbook. Something that I struggled with when I first was making the transition from sketchbooking to nature journaling was what to do with the blank page. As an artist, I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist, and I think that probably a lot of artists feel that way because, you have an idea, a preconceived idea of what you want your painting or your artwork to look like, and then, when it doesn't work out that way, it can be really disappointing. So, how do I face the blank page, especially when starting a new nature journal or starting a new month in the nature journal? I didn't realize it at the time when I was transitioning from sketchbook to nature journal, or when I first bought this sketchbook, but over time I've realized that using wet media in a book that's made for dry media has all but deleted my need to be perfect, my expectations. It has made it easier for me to confront the blank page. So when you're working in a sketchbook that is made for dry media, when you're using wet media in it, your pages are going to crinkle, it's going to get a little wrinkly, and it's just inherently going to be imperfect. And that has really helped me. Going into it knowing that it's not going to be perfect, that helps so much. And if you're someone who is starting a nature journal or a sketchbooking endeavor, I would suggest, if you use wet media, try a dry media sketchbook. This is my 4th year working in a nature journal, and through the experience of using different papers, different sketchbooks for my nature journaling, I know that I prefer the dry media sketchbook, not only because it helped me move past my desire for perfectionism, but also because I genuinely enjoy the way that my paintings look in it. So I think now is as good a time as any to bring you down onto my desk so we can have a look through my nature journals and do a little comparing of the different papers and the different media that I've used on them. I've selected 3 of my nature journals here that we can look through together and kind of compare and contrast. So these 2 are the Royal and Langnickel sketchbooks, and this one is a watercolor hand bound by me nature journal. So first I'm going to open up this one. And here is my title page, and right away you may be able to tell that this is very Edith Holden inspired, the way that I've written it, and also just the words. If you open up The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady, she has written in the front nature notes for 1906. So I was heavily inspired by Edith Holden in that regard. And I also want to say that having a title page is a great way to get rid of the fear of the blank page, because it gives you something specific to write on it. So when you open it up, you're not fretting about what you could possibly put on the first page. I feel like the first page is usually the hardest to draw on, to write on, to start with. So having something specific to put in there that you know you're going to be putting on the first page, it really helps. So I wanted to stop on this spread specifically because I wanted to talk about my fox. So obviously this is a red fox, and there's a little woodland study in the background, a very basic woodland study, but the fox is a very detailed rendition of a red fox, and I believe that this is better than probably any other red fox that I've ever painted, whether that's on watercolor loose leaf paper or in a watercolor sketchbook. I think the smoothness of this paper really works well with nature journaling, especially if you're someone like me who likes to have a certain amount of detail. There's a lot of detail going on here, and I can see the individual brushstrokes that represent the fox's individual hairs. So yeah, that is one of my favorite pieces I've ever painted in my nature journal. I want to stop on this page and open up my other nature journals because we have some comparing to do. So I'm going to skip over my residency pages and go straight into the nature journal for this year. So as you can see on both spreads, we have examples of leaves, and some of these leaves are even the same species. So these two are American elm, these two are post oak. This one is a white oak, there's a chinkapin oak, and a shagbark hickory. So right away, one of the big differences I notice is that I can tell that between this spread and this spread, I've learned something about light and how light falls on a subject and how to portray that. There is immensely more detail in these paintings than there is in these paintings. And even though I can tell these were made by someone more skilled, I like these equally. I like them for their own reason. I really like the way they look, and this is my favorite specimen on this page, the American elm. But yeah, just looking at them, they look vastly different. This elm, there's a lot more highlighting going on, and also I noticed that most of these specimens, they're all lighter in general than these. And so let's open up this page. So there's an example of a post oak on watercolor paper. And really the only difference I see is that I've used darker colors here. So there's a deeper contrast happening. These leaves look just about the same. Where is it? Okay. So this page I also wanted to stop on because right here I have two American elm leaves. So all of these specimens are American elm and they all look so different. And these specimens, even though they're painted on watercolor paper, I don't feel like they look better than this one. This one, again, looks more skilled, it's more detailed, and this one almost looks like an in-between of this one, so of these two. So there's more detail than this one, but it's not quite as detailed as this one. But I just wanted to show you those examples because these are painted in the watercolor sketchbook, but they don't look more skilled or better than the ones in the regular sketchbook. So this is another example. This is a chinkapin oak leaf. That's a chinkapin oak leaf. So both of these are chinkapin oak leaves. And again, really the only difference I can see is that I've used darker colors here. So there's more contrast. And I will say I really like contrast. So, maybe I do like this one a little more. But that just tells me that I need to use either darker colors when painting on this paper or more paint. Maybe it's being soaked up by this paper in a way that it's not being soaked up by that paper. There is a landscape study, a creek that's down the road from us. Some more birds. Lots of birds in this one. So I'm gonna switch over and go back to the beginning of this sketchbook. This is my artist in residence nature journal. So this is the journal I took with me when I was an artist in residence. Obviously, this is the journal that I was working in at the time. So as it says here, that was October 2025. And I wanted to make a comparison between my residency sketches and this sketch. So it might be hard to see on camera, but this is a sketch of a tulip poplar tree, and this is a sketch of one of our resident redbud trees, eastern redbuds. So this was my first time ever using graphite in my nature journal. So I just wanted a graphite drawing of the tree that these leaves fell from. And the tulip poplar is known for having a really tall, straight trunk. So I don't really know if I've depicted that very well, but I do really like the way that this sketch looks, and I continued making the tree sketches throughout my time in residency to accompany my watercolor paintings of the leaves. So most of my studies from residency are leaves. And autumn is the best time of year to find beautiful leaves to study. So yes, there's a northern red oak tree, and again, this is a redbud tree. And from what I can see on the camera, it looks like this one it has more contrast again, which seems to be the theme of this nature journal, that there's more contrast. But when I look at this page, I can tell that the pencil does not look that great on this paper because this paper is textured. It's not made for sketching. It looks much better, much smoother on this sketch paper. And I like the way the sketches look in this nature journal better. This is a good example of another northern red oak leaf. So this is a northern red oak. Both of these are northern red oaks. I feel like this is a really good example of the study on the watercolor paper not looking better technically than the sketches on, or the paintings on, the sketch paper. And again, in fact, the paintings on the sketch paper have more detail, and maybe it's because I worked on this longer. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was more inspired, so I put more work in, or there's more colors being used. But I can tell that I've made more marks on this specimen, this study, than I made on this study. And even this one that has what's probably a comparative amount of detail, I like it much better. I do. Again, it could be the color, it could be the memory of, where I was when I was painting this, but I think it's the paper. I really do. And, even if it's more than just the paper, if it's the memory, if it's the fun that I have painting on this paper, all of these reasons make me prefer this paper. So I'm going to close this one now and put it aside. And if you're interested in seeing all of the pages from my time in residency, I have a sketchbook tour where I go through all of those pages. I hope you enjoyed getting a look into my different nature journals, and hopefully you feel inspired to start if you've been having trouble starting, or maybe inspired to try a sketchbook that's not made for your chosen media. If you feel like sharing, I'd like to know what kind of sketchbooks you use for your nature journal practice and what materials you use for your nature journal practice. So like I said, I almost exclusively work in watercolors, but I have been adding graphite, and I've been having a lot of fun with those two mediums. Please like and subscribe if you're new here, and thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.